We have a massive Islanders trade update as trade rumors continue to swirl around their star forward's head, and this time there's a lot of concern, especially amongst fans, due to the source of these trade rumors. We'll break it all down on this episode of Islanders Digest, but quickly, before we do that, we noticed that 76% of you who watch these videos are not yet subscribed to the channel. So if you're an Islander fan, you want more Islanders content just like this, what are you waiting for? It's free. Subscribe to the channel and help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers before the draft. Now let's get right into these trade rumors. And once again, rumors are surfacing around Mathew Barzal. Only this time the source is a bit more concerning. I've been seeing a lot of articles about Barzal recently in these past 2 days between him going to Vancouver and basically every other team that needs a center. But whenever there's trade rumors, I try to find where they're kind of focused about like what caused the first rumor, because you get one rumor and then from there you get like 10 more as like people start to piggyback off each other. And it seems like the first rumor this time was an article by the Daily Faceoff listing 5 players who likely could use a change of scenery. And it's just obviously not ideal that Matt Barzal is the first player on this list. This is a section from that article right here. We're going to be going through some points here, and then of course you want to check out the entire article because it is a pretty interesting article. We're not going to be talking about all the players on this article, although we're going to mention some of them because I do think some of them actually do make a lot of sense for the Islanders to consider a trade for Matt Barzal. As I've said in previous videos, I don't think it makes sense to trade Barzal for young assets. Well, prospects in order to completely restart this franchise. That would be an absolute disaster. If you're trading Barzal, you likely want a player who's probably struggling on their team, probably a little younger than Barzal, but a player who perhaps it can work out for both teams where they get a player going. So that's what we're going to talk about in this video. First, I want to really talk about some of the issues with Barzal. Barzal is a player who's really been poking around these lists for a while. There's been a lot of talk that perhaps on another team his playmaking would be more useful because the Islanders simply don't have a lot of scorers to put around him, and that has been something they have really struggled to find. It's been a known issue for the Islanders really since Tavares was on the team. They need more goal scorers, and Barzal as a playmaker really struggles on this team. In addition, he has a $9.15 million contract that frankly he's in the third year of going into this season and he has not lived up to it yet. Sure, the production has been good, as we're going to talk about in a little bit when I talk about whether or not it makes sense to trade Matt Barzal, but one of the big issues has just been that he can't make the money worth it because he has not been healthy, at least so far, for a good portion of this contract. And I don't think I would call Matt Barzal really injury prone just yet, as I'm going to talk about a bit later. He has had a few injuries, but I do think some of them, it's just sometimes you get bad injury luck. Although I think he's one injury away from really being put in that injury prone category, and at that point it'll be really hard to move on for Matt Barzal, which is why I definitely think the Islanders have to consider it. Interesting enough, in this article, which again I linked in the description below if you want to check out, we're not talking about all the names on the article, but one of the names that is also mentioned is Marco Rossi of the Minnesota Wild. And as I'm going to really talk about in this video, I think Marco Rossi is a great example of a player that you should consider trading Matt Barzal for. Now, frankly, I don't really understand why the Minnesota Wilds are shopping Marco Rossi. At 23 years old, he seems like the exact type of player that you want to grab onto for your team and not let go. But it is a known thing, not even a rumor at this point, that the Wilds want to trade Rossi. In the playoffs just this season, he was demoted all the way to the fourth line. The fact he was being one of their top producers all season long. And even on the fourth line, he produced relatively well considering his ice time. This is, for some reason, this marriage between the Wild and Marco Rossi is not working out, whether it's his size or maybe they just don't trust him to give him a bigger role. And he's a restricted free agent this offseason, which makes him a prime trade candidate. In fact, it's more of a thing of where Marco Rossi is going to go, rather than whether or not he's going to be traded. That's really how far this relationship has seemed to devolve at this point. There are a lot of offer sheet rumors, but in this video, I'm really talking about how it really makes a lot of sense for the Islanders to consider trading Barzal for Marco Rossi. And we're also going to point out another name on this list is a name that we've talked about trading Barzal for in the past, in Elias Pettersson. Now, frankly, I'm not as in love with the idea of trading for a Pettersson, especially considering some of the concerns with his coaches and the general manager of the Canucks seeming to doubt whether or not he can bounce back. That does not really seem like an optimal situation you want to bring to New York. Still, Pettersson is a player who has had more points than Barzal in the past. He is 2 years younger, his contract's higher. And in this article by the Daily Faceoff, they actually mention a potential Pettersson Barzal swap, considering that Barzal is from Vancouver, means it's a little more likely that he'd accept a trade to Vancouver. Although I do want to note, recently there was a post, I think, by the Daily Faceoff, an interview where most Canadian players still have Canadian teams on their no trade list. And as we know, Barzal has a 22 no trade list team. It's going to make it a little more difficult to move him, but let's really talk about why it might make sense to move on from Matt Barzal. And the biggest thing, again, is injuries. In the 3 past seasons, Matt Barzal has suffered 3 major injuries that have kept him out for a long period of time. He came back just in time for the playoffs in 2022, 2023. Before that, he was having one of his more solid seasons with the New York Islanders, putting up 51 points in 58 games, really closer to a point per game mark, which is what you want with Matt Barzal. One of the biggest issues with Barzal is he really hasn't taken a step up from his rookie season where he put up those 85 points. Now, that rookie season, even though it was not great for the Islanders, was perhaps the most talented offensive team the Islanders have had around Barzal, so I don't think it's his fault, but at this point, we've only gotten one other season, being last season when Barzal put up a point per game, putting up 80 points in 80 games. And just between that season, there's just been a lot of injuries. And again, I don't think Barzal is injury prone yet, especially considering the 3 injuries that he has suffered have all been very different injuries. And that's important when you're talking about a player being injury prone. This is not like a situation where he has concussion issues and any hit can be his last play in the NHL. Of course, that can happen to anyone. You never want that for anyone. But that's not the case with Matt Barzal. He had an issue where he seemed to twist his ankle 3 seasons ago. Then he had an issue earlier this season, which kept him out for the first chunk that he missed, where it seemed like he hurt his ribs. It was a little difficult to see exactly what happened there. That's kind of my hunch on what happened with the first injury with Barzal. He came back and he started the season slow, but when he came back, he started to play well and really improve the Islanders' play while he was playing. And then he shattered his kneecap, getting hit by that puck blocking a shot. Absolutely brutal injury, really mirroring the injury that he had when he was drafted. That really helped the Islanders get him at 16th overall. And more importantly, with Barzal, frankly, the points have never quite been where you want for a player making $9 million a year. This season, yeah, he put up 20 points, only played 30 games. But even then, in a full season, that's really like a 60-ish point pace. Not what you're looking for with Barzal. And when it comes to what they're paying him, it just might no longer be the best fit, especially now that Barzal is going to be 28. Now, of course, he's not too old. Beyond the injuries, I don't really think there's concern of Barzal regressing at all. He's still skating as fast as ever. But now with that injury concern, it really makes you wonder if perhaps it's best for the Islanders to go in a different, younger direction. Which brings me to Rossi, who I think would be a great fit for the Islanders. Again, I'm not saying the Islanders should be outright shopping Barzal. I don't think they should be trading him for a bunch of draft picks to really start this team over. But if you can get a player like Marco Rossi in a package for Barzal, I think you take it. This is a player who's a restricted free agent, so you can really sign him for a long-term deal. It seems like he's looking for a 7x7 or an 8x8, which really works for the Islanders. Frankly, looking at the production Marco Rossi had last season, putting up 60 points in 82 games, Daily Faceoff notes, this is likely a player who is really close to flirting with a point per game for the next 7 to 8 years. He's a great player who's really taken steps forward in his first 2 seasons of the NHL. Again, don't understand why the Wild are shopping this guy, but he is. Now, he is a bit smaller than Barzal at 5'9", which is actually why this trade would probably work for the Minnesota Wild, getting a player with more playoff experience who can play more on the wing in addition to center. I think their concern is really having a player who is 23 years old, being 5'9", in the middle of the ice for their team. They think they have too many smaller players who play with skill. That's not a concern with the Islanders because they really don't have that many players who play with skill. So a player like Marco Rossi would be a great addition, especially if you can get an additional pick or a prospect coming the other way with him, which you likely would get if you're trading Barzal. This would be an excellent fit for the New York Islanders. And frankly, I think something they should really explore. Let me know what you think about this in the comments. Quickly, we're also going to talk about Elias Pettersson. This is somebody I mentioned as a potential fit for a Barzal trade in a previous video, although this is one that I feel makes a little less sense for the Islanders. Pettersson is making $11.6 million, and when he was putting up 102 points in 80 games, yeah, that is exactly what you want from Pettersson. And in that sense, honestly, I don't think you'd be able to trade for him. But this year, he put up 15 goals, 30 assists in 64 games. Frankly, at times looks unplayable. And the big concern with Pettersson is the way he's preparing for games. And because of that, that's really not something you want to entertain with the New York Islanders. I agree that Pettersson likely does need a change of scenery to potentially get himself going. With him, though, I really don't think it's worth the gamble. Let me know what you think in the comments, though. Again, Pettersson scores a lot more goals than Barzal does, which is another reason why this is an interesting trade to consider. Even with Rossi in his first 2 seasons putting up 21 goals and then 24 goals, going up in the goal department. And 24 goals is more than Barzal has ever scored for the New York Islanders. The most he's ever scored is 23. That was last season. Before that, he's typically a guy who scores around 17 or 18 per year, and that's been a real issue when it comes to the Islanders and Barzal. The fact that he's just not willing to shoot as much as you'd like. And perhaps that's another reason why you consider going in another direction. Considering the Islanders are struggling so much to find goal scoring, perhaps a player like Marco Rossi, who has a little bit less playmaking, but more of a shot and more willingness to shoot, is something that is desirable. So let me know what you think about this in the comments below. I'm really interested to see, who would you rather trade Barzal for, either Pettersson or Rossi, or are you uninterested in moving him at all? As always, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel. My name is Patrick Nilan. This is Islanders Digest. Let's go Islanders.